All right. So many thanks indeed for joining us once again. Of course, this particular moment we want to talk about the Schizophrenia Foundation of Kenya. It's an organization, a voluntary organization that helps families, friends and people with schizophrenia. To tell us more about that foundation and what it does is Kibashia Gatu, who's the director. Welcome to the Power Breakfast, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's begin from where we have to begin from. What exactly do you do?
Schizophrenia Foundation of Kenya is is a charitable organization that was formed around 1997 by groups of persons who are concerned about members in the family who are suffering from mental illness. And because of the trauma that happens in the family when somebody has got a mental illness, there was a feeling that whereas mental illnesses, first of all, there's a lot of stigma around mental illnesses. Families are disoriented. Persons who are ill are also disoriented. That they need to be a kind of a way of helping the families. Whereas the doctors deal with the clinical aspect, the families have got a social issues and social problems that they need to solve in relationship with the medication. So these families came together and organized what we call now the Schizophrenia Foundation of Kenya. Schizophrenia is a mental illness. It's a mental illness that probably would be considered to be the most severe of the illness, of mental illness. The others illness like depression, bipolar, anxiety, and so all that. But the most severe of the illnesses is the schizophrenia. So
why is it, if it's very severe, why don't they put them in institutions? Like it went to Mathare, why won't they remain at home if it's very severe?
You see, there are different approaches to how you treat an illness. For example, if you've got malaria, if it is very severe attack of malaria, you can be taken to hospital and admitted for a period of time so that you're given concentrated treatment. But then once you have settled down and the symptoms are easing, you are released to go and recover at home. It is the same situation with the areas of mental illness. The very severe situations, when somebody needs to be contained so that various other administration can be done, at that particular moment there's may need for institutionalization. But there is a movement in the world towards management of mental health that is moving more and more away from institutionalized, centered treatment of mental health into more of community-centered, family-centered management of mental health and mental illnesses.
You spoke about the place of stigma and discrimination against people with schizophrenia. What are you doing to sort of sensitize people who perhaps this is the first, they have had their first encounter with people who have it?
Our approach at the Schizophrenia Foundation is that whereas the professional psychiatrist deals with treatment and medication and diagnosis, we as a community-based organization train and teach the community on what it really is. Many people think that if you have got a mental illness, you are possessed.
Absolutely.
Or you are bewitched. Or you are brought up badly. You know, all those, in fact, all reasons that put the blame on either the sick person or the family. But we do know scientifically, and we do educate to people that certain mental illnesses are purely biological conditions that have changed in the brain. Because schizophrenia or mental illness is a biological disease, it's a biological illness in the brain. And the brain, because of the illness, because the brain is the one which dictates our behaviors. our mode of operation. But because of the illness in the brain, because of certain chemical imbalances or distortions, we produce distorted reactions, distorted thoughts, distorted behaviors. But it is basically a biological, it's a physical illness that manifests itself in our behavior.
Well, how do you know somebody who has got that illness? And are there age limits?
Anybody, anyone, any class, any sex can have a mental illness.
What about specifically that?
Schizophrenia also. It can also affect anybody. And schizophrenia is a development of conditions that have not been resolved. For example, mental illness may start in a very simple way. It may start with a simple depression, or it could be by a trauma after an incident, an accident, a very traumatizing experience. And when the emotions and the life of this person is not taken into control, there's no management, there's no counseling, there's no support system, that person internalizes the trauma, and it can lead to depression. That depression can lead to emotional destabilization and eventually into an illness. And that is what, if not treated, will bring a situation where somebody starts distorted behavior, even hearing of voices or sounds or instructions, and telling them to go anywhere or do something, or that become very paranoia, very suspicious of everybody, of everything. But that is because the treatment was not done in good time. And just like any other illness, even with cancer, for example, if you detected early, it is treated. And the same thing with mental illness, even with schizophrenia. If it is treated very early, it will be managed and treated.
Right. Perhaps let's talk about management, because it is estimated that 40% of sufferers have no contact with formal mental health systems. How do you manage it?
Now, the management is in various levels. One, there is the management by the doctor. The doctor, when you go to a doctor, and the doctor is, you present the patient to a doctor and diagnoses, he then, or she then, gives you the medication necessary. That is one level. That intervention that can be done by medication. There is an intervention that can also be done by counseling. Okay? And that is probably on the earlier stages before it becomes very serious. But having been given the medication, and the diagnosis has been done and been given the medication, what happens now, the patient either, as we said earlier, can be taken into an institution, and for us, we prefer that this institution be not an institution like Mathare or a hospital, but the institution be the home. We recognize the importance of the home, because at the end of the day, all patients return home. And our system of health in Africa, by the way, is very family-centered. We spend a lot of energy as a family when you are sick. When one of us is sick, we spend not only time, but resources. You go look at Kenyatta Hospital, go there at around midday. The traffic is very heavy, because we still have a culture of going to see our patients, our relatives. So the family is very important. So the management of the family, this is what has for a long time been missing. And this is why Schizophrenia Foundation, they looked at and said, the care of the person who is sick, you know, the one who is sick is not quite aware of what is happening. No. But the family gets disoriented. Somebody in the family may have to stop work so that they can actually look after this loved one. They need someone to give this loved one medication, food, clothing, and even to keep them, sometimes, to keep them looked after so that they do not go outside and get into dangerous situations. Now, that management is what we train ourselves to. We teach families by also helping them to share. Families, we bring together families that have persons with their loved ones who are mentally affected. They share experiences. Also, the users, those who are users of medication, also we bring them together. They talk and have a therapeutic exercise of sharing, because shocks and stigma, unless I know and you tell me, don't worry, I have also gone through
the
this,
problem,
and I know it works. I will be left alone, and stigma will eat me, will eat my family, and and that will not help the patient. So the management is both psychosocial, we're talking about is psychological and social, and also it is by medication. So for us, we integrate all. We would like to take the place of a psychiatrist is available. We will have to have a counselor available. We would like to know that the family understands, and also the patient also understands what they are going through.
Tell us about the extent of your foundation. Where are you?
Well, we are based, at the moment, we operate from a church that has given us a premises just before you come to Ngong, at the end of Karen, a place called PCA Motero Church. And what the foundation has done is move out of Nairobi and establish family support groups in various parts of Kenya. We have a family support group we are operating there now. We have a family support groups in Nyeri. At the moment, we have moved more into the central region of Kenya, and we want to move further out. We have some family support groups in Nyahururu, in Mukurweini, in Meru. And we also, as we develop, and Nyandarua also, and Javine, and as we move out, we also move into health centers as our focal point. For example, in Ngong, through the ministry, because we cooperate with the Ministry of Health, we have been able to establish a clinic every week, because there's a psychiatric nurse, and we thank God that there is a psychiatric nurse. One of the challenges we have is many of the psychiatric nurses are deployed for other activities in the health centers rather than the psychiatric services. But this psychiatric nurse, Mrs. Kemani, is doing a lot of good work, because she helps to give medication. And now, instead of going to Mathare Hospital or going into to see a private doctor, if the person had already been diagnosed before, they comes with that prescription, there will be medication in the hospital. So we also use the health center as their focal point, and then we bring them together, the families and the persons who are sick, into dialogue and training programs. And therefore do advocacy, so that we talk in churches, we talk in groups, we talk to various people about how to manage, and that it is not something you can be afraid of, and that there's actually, one of our programs is reason to hope. There is hope. It is not a hopeless situation.
Right. I stand to be corrected, but your foundation works in partnership with the Ministry of Health, Mathare Hospital, and of course the World Fellowship for Schizophrenia.
Yes.
There was a concern back in May 17th where patients rioted over poor conditions in Mathare.
Yes.
And of course even Al Jazeera back in 2011 noted that a television crew filmed an inmate locked inside a cell with a corpse. What is being done to basically sort out such institutions, and how are you helping that?
For us, let me put it this way, that for us, the incident of Mathare Hospital is an interesting situation for us, because, as I said, we deal more with the community, and we looked more as person being reintegrated into the community rather than putting in an institution, and that's why we use all the arms that are necessary to uphold this particular person for integration. But because institutions are necessary at one point, as we said earlier, Mathare Hospital is there. But it's unfortunate that we have not spent enough resources on the area of mental health. And this is why Mathare, as a referral hospital, has that problem. Let me inform the people that in 2011, the National Commission for Human Rights published a book after that incident by CNN. They published a study, a review of what the book they called The Silent Minds, and about not only about what happened in Mathare Hospital, but the plight of mental health in this country. And they do suggest that a lot needs to be done. It is neglected. Stigma is too much. Unfortunately, you see, like You remember when stigma was very strong for HIV and AIDS?
Yeah.
And somehow we overcame that. But mental illness has always been there as an issue, but we have never overcome the stigma. In fact, it is very interesting. It's very unlikely for you to hear somebody stand up and say, I have suffered from mental illness for a long time, I'm under medication, and I'm back to work, and I'm okay. But you hear people talking about, confessing about HIV and AIDS. The stigma for mental illness is even much greater. And a lot needs to be done. So what we have been doing ourselves is to support the Ministry of Health and to fight for a new policy in mental health issues and to fight for increased budget. Only 2% of the Ministry of Health budget in the Ministry of Health Services, 2% is for mental health. And yet, Mr. Mutegi, who doesn't want to have a healthy mind? In fact, mental wellness and mental health is a concern for everybody. The 40 million people in this country, it should be their concern.
There's another concern, just apart from just the institutions, but then focusing on the personnel. There's a recent study from Kenya's Independent Medical Legal Unit that showed that 39% of Kenyans mental health patients suffered abuse while in hospital.
Yes.
How is that being dealt with?
It's a difficult. That is, I think, one of the biggest problem again is stigma. There are people who, as we said earlier, people who think if you are mentally ill, you are possessed, and the only way to get rid of that possession is violence, is force. Yeah. That is one. Secondly, and very disappointing and very sad, is that because of low number of professionals in this area, the number of psychiatrists in this country are less than 80. The number of psychiatric nurses that are produced, the one we have that are active, are less than 500. Now, therefore, there are some times when work to manage people who are sick is given to people who have absolutely no idea about the issues of mental illness. Surprisingly, brother, is that most of the doctors in this country cannot help you with matters of mental illness. Their training does not include a serious study on that. And even if they did as a course, part of the course, it is not taken seriously. In other words, psychiatry is not popular. So the doctors you see who are psychiatrists are special people because they have a passion. Sometimes it's more personal, and they should be given a lot of credit. So it is at that point where you have other people who are not actually medical trained are actually helped, given work to manage. And when there's a frustration and you don't know what to do, what happens? You use force.
To what extent is this illness a a lifestyle problem? I'm thinking about alcohol abuse and drug abuse. Is that a part of the cause of the problem?
Yes, it's a very interesting debate that goes on because it's like the story of the egg and the hen. Which comes first? Is it that the person, because of abuse of alcohol and drugs, that mental illness comes, or is it mental illness that leads to abuse of these substances? Very interestingly is that when we look at the causes of mental illness, or how you could detect, for example, that you are having challenges in this area, the area of substance abuse is probably only the fifth step. It's not the first step. Okay, and it is related to the social aspect. In most mental illness issues, there is a social dimension. There is an unresolved conflict. There is a family issue, but there is also biologically that can happen out of stress that may have come, for example, at delivery, and damage was done. Okay, but essentially, our problem is psychosocial, and even the abuse of alcohol. Sometimes it starts, and in most cases, people who abuse alcohol or drugs have had a mental condition that they were not aware of, and they are medicating themselves. Initially, it starts by self-medication. That you take a beer, you think, now I feel calm, and I feel, because I was feeling a bit depressed, and so now I feel a bit better. But you realize that self-medication turns out to be another problem. Because it makes you feel better, you continue. But a doctor will tell you. In fact, there's a very interesting debate that was there last week. And Dr. Atwoli is a psychiatrist from Moi University, Eldoret. And he was saying that marijuana itself is not necessarily addictive. It is that anybody who may be abusing, you need to have known that there could be an underlying cause before somebody starts misusing, you know. And the process of addiction, which is very complex, is the mixture of the two. That you have a problem and you want to resolve it, and you think this is resolving it. So you hang on to it, and by the time this drug becomes a problem to you. But when you see, the problem of mental illness is also the problem that our society, because you ask about our society, our society is losing a certain fiber of connectivity and integration that used to be there. You remember when you were maybe young, Mr. Mutegi, if you went around misbehaving,
you are the property of the
Amzee will call you.
You are the property of the
community, and tell you, look, my son, things don't happen that way. Talk to God and don't want blah blah blah. These days, how many people are there to tell you that, to tell your child that? You have left everything to the school, maybe. The teachers are overwhelmed. So problems accumulate. And we are seeing suicide cases even as early as the age of 12. You know, and the alcohol problem in Central Province. We may look, and it is good that we look at the supply of alcohol and fight it, and supply of drugs. But what is it that makes people want to drink it more and more? Apart from that, somebody is selling it because it's a business. You are enjoying it. But it's not everybody who takes alcohol is an alcoholic. But there are serious issues. And these are because of social pressures that we do not talk about. So for us in the Schizophrenia Foundation, we try to deal with the social issues. We try to deal with when we bring the family together, we also try to help them because of disorientation and because of losing a livelihood. We also teach livelihood skills so that we can reintegrate. We have groups that are forming their own cooperatives so that they can relate to the welfare, the welfare department because they are registered, and they can start a project. Or they can get donor money for whoever they may be able to give them. Because integration into the home is the answer. So we talk ourselves as families, as partners in care.
All right. A couple of comments came in here. People want to find out how can they get in touch with you.
Yes.
Perhaps just clarify that, where you can be found.
Okay, we can be found at PCA Motero. We have our number is 0722. You can use my number. 0722 774406. Or you can use the email SFK Reason to Hope.
Reason to Hope, one word.
Yes, at yahoo.com.
At yahoo.com.
Yes.
SKF Reason to Hope at yahoo.com.
So the number is
SFK.
there.
SFK Reason to Hope at yahoo.com.
Okay. So there you have it. The number as well on your screen there. So if you want to get in touch, you can actually just follow that. It's been a great honor indeed serving you today. Of course, talking to Kibasya Gatu, who is the director, Schizophrenia Foundation of Kenya. My name is Johnson Mwakazi.
And I'm Teginjao.
Till tomorrow, as God wills. Tomorrow is Cheche, by the way. Sparks. You don't want to miss that particular session from 7 a.m. So let's make a date. Tomorrow, as God wills. All the best.